I'm back. So my mom introduced me to high tea, and ever since then I've been addicted to scones. So I did some research, and there are two types of scones. You can have savory or you can have sweet. So earlier this week when we made chicken noodle soup, I made savory. Those are cheddar farmhouse scones. You'll notice that there's a little bit of green in there. Those are chives. And I used to make those for my kids with little, cookie cutters that in the shape of farmhouse animals like pigs and cows and things like that. They loved it. Today we're actually going to make a sweet scone, and it's just very simple, basic ingredients. It's going to be cream, sugar, flour, butter, and salt, and a little bit of baking powder. So I'll get to work right now, show you all the ingredients, and we'll see how they turn out. So here are all the ingredients. I'm going to double the recipe. It takes 2 cups of all-purpose flour, so I'm doubling it to 4. And this would be 2/3 of a cup of white sugar. We're going to need 10 tablespoons, so a whole cube plus the first 2 increments of a second cube of unsalted butter, because we're going to add salt later. And we need a teaspoon of salt. I showed you the baking powder, but we do need a teaspoon of salt. And for the baking powder, we need 4 teaspoons. That's what's going to really make them poof up and be light and airy. This is heavy whipping cream, and we're going to need 2 cups of that plus a little extra to brush the top, so probably about 4 tablespoons. And you can see I've got my measuring items out here. I've already started with adding the flour into my mixer. I love a mixer because it's fast and easy to make this stuff. What I'm going to do is put all of our dry ingredients in first, and then I'm going to blend it. And then I'm going to put in the wet ingredient of the heavy whipping cream. But before I even do that, I'm going to cut in the butter. So let's finish up with our dry ingredients, and I'll slice the butter, and I'll get back. Okay, so all the dry ingredients are in the mixer. I'm going to turn that on and let it blend. And the more it's blended, in terms of all of the leavening agents and all that stuff, the better your scones will. So I added the softened butter, and you saw earlier that it had like that grainy texture, and as soon as I added the 2 cups of cream, the dough actually came together nicely. It's moldable. It's not real sticky, so you can see I can use it with my hands. You don't really want to handle that too much though, because you don't want to melt that butter. The scones won't come out right. So what I'm going to do next is roll it out. Before I roll it out, I've prepared my cream. I have my sugar for going on top of the scones. I'm preheating the oven to 400 degrees, and I've brought out my stoneware pans. If you can use stoneware for this, it's the best because it cooks evenly and distributes that heat nicely through the scones, so you don't end up with an undercooked top side and an overcooked bottom side. All right, so I've rolled the dough out on my stone countertop. A lot of people will use like a marble board. Don't need to do that. You can just be sloppy like me and do it on the countertop. It is a little less than ½ an inch. Like this is a little more than an inch, and that's pretty, that's fairly thin, but you can kind of see the consistency there. I use these lovely little cookie cutters that I used to use when my kids were young. They loved having the different shapes of the flower and the heart, and you just cut them out and place them directly onto the board, your cooking sheet, and they don't spread, so they should come out just fine when they bake. I'll finish putting these together and then show you next steps of glazing. All right, so I've done all of the cookie cutting with the heart and the little flower. You can see those are the scraps that are left, and I have all of the shapes loaded onto our baking sheets. So now the next step is going to be to take the cream sugar. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take my little barbecue brush, make sure it's nice and soaked, and I'm going to brush each one of these lovely little hearts to make sure that they're pretty well soaked on top. And once they're soaked on top, I'm going to take a pinch of sugar and I'm going to just put a little bit on top, and it just gives it a little bit of a crunch and a little sweetness. It just finishes it nicely. So they've been in for about 5 to 7 minutes and they're already starting to poof up. You see them rising. We're going to wait till they're golden brown. Usually it's about 15 minutes, depending on how hot your oven runs. In the time that it took for me to clean up my mess and get out a couple of containers and a cooling rack and putting the extra dough in another container, our scones have baked nicely. So I'm going to see if we can pull this out and double check to make sure that they are all baked. Yep. So they're pretty much golden brown. Some of them in the center are a little bit more done than the others. So I've removed them from the baking sheet and I put on the cooling rack for a few minutes before transferring them into some airtight containers to keep them soft and fresh. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll leave the ingredients at the end so that you can pause it